Now, the situation we're in is that we don't have enough supply to be able to give energy as per demand. So there is a big problem between the supply side, which is the generation, and the demand, which is the end user, the customer. And this can all be seen as in a balance. You're sitting with a balance with a very, very sharp little narrow point which it's balancing on, and we're measuring this balance by the frequency of the system. And the system is to run at 50 hertz, and if the frequency goes down, it means that we've got more demand and we don't have enough supply, and so the system goes out of balance, and then the system can trip. And to prevent that, we have national control, which is controlling the system, that it basically sheds off the load in time, so we prevent an imbalance. They are running the system at this stage perfectly. The system, from an operational perspective, is well balanced and well run, and the risks there are extremely low. For instance, if the frequency is not balanced, then the stations are actually equipped with protection so that it islands the station so that we don't go into a blackout. Because a blackout means that the power stations have now all come to an halt. They're standing still. They're being basically rotated with boring gear equipment, which comes from standby gens and so on. And those stations, it's going to take weeks to get them up and going. We will not reach that situation because we've got an excellent national control and we've got excellent protection in place. So everybody that's romping and raving about blackouts, we're not going to get a blackout, okay? Forget it. We will most probably could run into a situation of a brownout. And in a brownout, what happens there is that we find that we don't have enough generation and we get too much load too quick. And for some rhyme or reason, something goes wrong with the frequency and we can't correct it, then the power stations all go into standby mode and they trip and go in standby mode, and they are immediately available to bring back on. Then Eskom, to get the balance going, will bring them onto the system and then put some load back on. And so they do it on both sides, bring in generation, bring in load, and bring in first the critical loads, the hospitals and so on. And as they start bringing them in, they start balancing this whole system again. And that can take maximum 3 days. Typically 1-2 days, maximum 3 days. So the worst case scenario for South Africa, for Eskom, South Africa, and all the people is a brownout. Okay? What we're having now is load shedding. And load shedding is very controlled. It's not blackouts, as some guys call it. It's very controlled. And it's set up to have a healthy network operational with what's available. So everything that's available and which is in good condition is used to supply the load to the customer, and it's done over a very well-controlled network. So the system is well balanced, the frequency stays at 50 hertz, and we have got a healthy network, we've got a healthy system. Our problem is government did not allow the new builds to go on from 20 years back, and now we don't have enough new generation or even quality generation from our new power stations to be able to make that balance, that we have more supply so we can have more load. And this whole lot is very well calculated and worked out by looking at the load curves, which is used by Eskom to determine when to load shed and so on. And that's also, it's excellently done. And you would find that if you look at it, the worst case scenario we could be sitting with, okay, is that we're going to be for 4 hours with electricity and 4 hours without electricity, and 4 hours with electricity, 4 hours without electricity. That is stage 8, okay? That's stage 8. So that is the worst case scenario we could be sitting with. And that, if they don't get new power stations on being built or new supply coming on, or getting other power stations fixed up and working and correct, we're going to be sitting with at least a stage 4 to a stage 6 and maybe a stage 8. But that's the worst case scenario. Now, I must be honest with you. I find it, and I have got more than 40 years of experience in Eskom. I've just retired, okay? I find it very, very suspect that now suddenly we've got all these problems at all of the power stations. That statistically and technically, that just doesn't sound right. I feel that we must probably got a larger sabotage problem, a political interference sabotage problem within the situation. And now, before we forget, we've got this whole story about Koeberg. Okay, so everybody's all worried about Koeberg. Koeberg, it is a planned upgrade of Koeberg. Koeberg has served us excellently for the years, the decades it's been in service. Now to extend it with another 20 years, to serve us for another 20 years, we need to spend 6 months to upgrade the heat exchangers, okay? That is 6 months to get that power station's life extended, which is our best and most best quality supplier of our whole fleet, suspended for another 20, extended for another 20 years. We cannot afford to take Koeberg and leave it in the system now. They've done it. They're going to most probably leave it in to run it for another few days until Saturday, and then they will have to take it out of the system and get it up and going for that we can have that extended 20 years. It's well planned. It's set up to extend and to give us more energy into the future rather than trying to capture a few days. Our big problem currently now is to get the oil and gas turbines going again. And that again, it's a political scenario, it's money and so on. So folks, don't stress and don't get whatever tied in knots because of the situation we're in now.
Some people say there's a possibility of a stage 15. And you said no, stage 8. Can you explain that?
Well, there's a possibility of anything, Izak, but I think if you start looking at a stage 15, when you look at that table, which I showed the different stages on and the worst case scenario, 4 hours on and 4 hours off. So finally, you will go to the thing where it'll be 1 hour on and 1 hour off and 1 hour on and 1 hour off. They can't do that really, because you're sitting in a situation that your switch gear and your operating staff and the whole situation is going to be of such a situation that they must probably going to throw off the non-paying customers totally, leave them in the dark, and then the politicians will interfere from a humanitarian position and say, you have to switch them back on again because of this and this and this and this. But you're going to find that if we go to that point, it's not going to be a blackout. You're still going to have a controlled system. But what would happen is that you will have less available to be able to supply less. And that means that you will have a typical brownout situation where you can only supply your hospitals and your sewage systems and your water pumps and so on. The big thing there is that at home you need to start thinking about catering for a stage 8 and possibly more, by making certain that you do certain little things at home and you can survive that. From a workplace scenario, if they need to plan ahead, they will have to start looking at alternative energy sources in the form of generation from generating plants. Municipalities must look at getting electricity from IPP providers and so on. If the state's not going to pull finger on this one, and they are already, this is why we're in the spiral, they are already horrendously late. Yes, we're going to be sitting with most probably stage 8 load shedding or so on for quite a period of time.